If you've ever caught yourself wondering what our planet looked like tens of thousands of years ago, you're not alone. Throughout the ages, countless people, from scientists to archaeologists, have launched investigations to find answers to this very question. So, I'm here to share with you in today's video a journey into the past with archaeological findings that are nothing short of astonishing. And I'm speaking of everything from the discovery of a virus that's 35000 years old and still viable to the discovery of over 50 living organisms in a cave that dates back more than 5.5 million years. Yes, you heard that right. Let's dive in. Number 1. World's largest virus resurrected from 34,000-year-old permafrost. Deep under the Siberian ice, hidden about 100 feet down in the permafrost, there had been a virus just lying in wait. It was there for thousands and thousands of years. While the world above it changed, animals went extinct, and humans started developing the world to the point that they discovered that old viruses like it could still exist. And hey, I'm not exaggerating. The virus was around 30000 years old. The humans who discovered it were a team of French researchers led by Jean-Michel Claverie and Chantal Abergel from the Mediterranean Institute of Microbiology, who decided to look into Anyusk, a secluded spot in Siberia's Chukotka area in the year 2000. The team drilled into the frozen earth beside the Anui River to look for ancient viruses. But why would an ancient virus even be alive? Well, the thing about viruses is that they're kind of in a gray area when it comes to being alive. They need a living cell to do the whole reproduction thing, but outside of that, they're just there, not doing much, kind of like a seed waiting to sprout. So, a zombie virus? Well, sure, you can call it that. Anyway, so the team figured out the soil in the area was between 34,000 and 37,000 years old, using radiocarbon dating. More than a decade later, they announced they found not just any virus, but a viable one in that permafrost sample. And it was nothing like they expected. Claverie said that while they had believed that viruses could survive for this long and still remain infectious, this one was a bit different. It was huge compared to the ones we normally have now. And you know what? Before 2003, everyone thought viruses were super tiny, invisible without fancy microscopes, and way smaller than bacteria. But then, the discovery of this virus named the Pithavirus sibericum was made. This latest find breaks records at 1.5 micrometers long. And I know you're thinking, but that's so tiny. That's massive for a virus. This one looks like an oval with a dark edge and a unique plug at one end and is almost as big as a bacterial cell. This virus, thankfully, doesn't harm humans, but has a unique appetite for single-celled organisms like amoebae. It invaded the amoebae, hijacked their inner parts to replicate itself, and eventually caused the host cells to burst, releasing new viruses ready to continue the cycle. What's interesting about these giant viruses is their simplicity in choosing hosts. Amoebae eat by wrapping themselves around their food, a process known as phagocytosis. The giant virus just has to wait to be consumed. And that's quite different from how viruses infect humans and other animals, which require a way more intricate process because our cells don't just swallow invaders whole. This limitation explains why giant viruses are, well, giant. They don't need to sneak in. They're taken in. What's more, this virus's survival in extreme cold for millennia hints at an astonishing resilience. Viruses, lacking the machinery for life's typical activities, can remain inactive indefinitely, awakening only when conditions are right. The implication is staggering. Viruses could potentially outlast all other life forms on Earth, lying in wait for millions of years. Looks like vampire immortality was inspired by these viruses. And before you come at me saying, bro, that was a zombie alive, not alive, well, calm down. They found actually alive organisms as well. Number 2. A cave that's millions of years old and has an ecosystem of its own. It's not every day that you stumble upon a hidden world, a place cut off from the rest of the planet for over 5.5 million years. That's exactly what Cristian Lascu, a Romanian scientist, did back in 1986 near Mangalia in Romania. He discovered Movil Cave, a secret underground kingdom with a maze of limestone tunnels you have to dive 18 meters down a shaft to explore. Inside, it's like stepping onto another planet. In the cave, the air you breathe is much thinner, with only half the oxygen we're used to on the surface, and there's this strong scent of sulfur everywhere. This is because of tiny life forms, chemosynthetic bacteria that survive on carbon dioxide and methane, making their home in this unique environment. The air is thick with a smell that reminds you of rotten eggs, all thanks to the dangerous hydrogen sulfide floating around. It's not exactly a human-friendly place to hang out for long, but here's where it gets even wilder. Deep in this cave, life survives without a glimpse of sunlight. It's a world doused in darkness, where the whole food chain starts with bacteria. These aren't your average bacteria, they're special. They don't need sunlight to survive. Instead, they convert inorganic carbon into energy, thanks to a process called chemosynthesis. It's like photosynthesis's underground cousin. All you need to do is sunlight for chemical energy. Anyhow, these tiny bacterial powerhouses form the base of an entire ecosystem. They grow into thick mats on the cave walls and water surfaces, becoming a buffet for some of the cave's critters. It's a full circle moment down there. These bacteria get eaten by some animals, which then support fungi and other bacteria, keeping the cycle going. And yes, archaeologists and scientists have found out that this cave is home to over 60 unique creatures that have adapted to life without sunlight. This place is an ecosystem on its own, with organisms ranging from cave leeches to snails, scorpions, and even spiders. But among this diverse crowd of cave dwellers, there's one that stands out, a creature so supreme, it's earned the title King of the Cave. This isn't your average creepy crawly. We're talking about a venomous centipede. It's been named Cryptops speleorex, the largest organism in Mobile Cave to date. At a modest length of just over 2 inches, this centipede might not seem like much at first glance, but in the world of Mobile Cave, it's a giant. Its very name translates to King of the Cave. Adaptation has been key to its survival. With elongated antennae and legs, this centipede navigates the dark, hunts, and captures its prey with a venomous bite. Its diet, a variety of other cave dwellers, including isopods, spiders, and small beetles. What makes Cryptops speleorex truly fascinating, though, are its distinct features. From its less hairy body to its specialized anatomy, including over 300 tiny pores on its sides and saw-like teeth on its legs, every detail has been fine-tuned by millions of years of evolution. Genetically, it's a standout, quite different from any of its relatives outside the cave. If there's one thing that proves how you can survive regardless of your environment, it's this species. Now, I've talked about the zombie virus, an ancient yet not so ancient centipede. How about a worm that's been thriving underground? Number 3, the tiniest worm that likes to live in gold mines. Scientists found a tiny worm in the depths of a South African gold mine, buried 1.3 kilometers beneath the Earth's crust. They've named it Halocephalobus mephisto. The name was inspired by a character from Faustus's Mephistopheles, who, just like this worm, wasn't a fan of the light. This name makes perfect sense because this little worm makes its home in the dark, hidden corners of our planet, far from any ray of sunlight. And sometimes they call it the devil's worm. And honestly, a closer look at it tells you exactly why. What's the special thing about a worm that it has so many names, you may ask? Well, this little creature is the deepest living multicellular organism ever found. It has made its home in the fluid-filled fractures of rock, feasting on bacteria. The team, led by Tullis Onstott from Princeton University, was thrilled by their find. They had been exploring the dark beneath our feet for 15 years, specifically targeting the ultra-deep mines of South Africa. These mines stretch over 1.8 miles into the earth, a place of endless darkness and huge pressure. Yet here, they found life complex and thriving in conditions we once thought impossible for multicellular organisms. You know what's interesting, though? The devil worm doesn't even exist at the surface. Like at A, it's a true child of the deep and lives in an environment that's as alien to us as the surface of another planet. This little nematode, just about 0.5 millimeter long, is quite literally a giant for its prey, because despite its tiny size, this worm is 10 billion times bigger compared to the bacteria it feeds on. And the best part is that the secret to its survival is its small size. Underground spaces are cramped, with fractures in the rock only a few millimeters wide at most. Yet, this is where H. Mephisto has made its home. Navigating through tight squeezes, that lead to a very ancient source of water dating back at least 2,900 years. How they ended up more than a kilometer under the Earth's surface is a mystery. One theory suggests that nematodes might hitch a ride with moving water, possibly drawn deeper by mining activities that lower water tables or simply by following their bacterial food source deep into the Earth. The researchers managed to bring the nematode back to the lab, where this tiny, simple creature is still squirming around in the lab, and they found some pretty interesting things about it. These worms reproduce asexually, which means these nematodes can reproduce without a partner, either through self-fertilizing eggs or being hermaphrodites containing both male and female reproductive organs. Okay. That's enough worm talk. Let's move on to the next discovery. Number 4, the origin of multiple species may have been China. Now, this one might just be a lot more shocking. So there was an international collaboration between Yunnan University, the University of Exeter, the University of Saskatchewan, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the University of Lausanne, and the University of Leicester. And I mean, you can just tell what they discovered isn't something you hear about every day. I can bet it isn't. Their spotlight shone on Changjiang, a city tucked away in the mountains of Yunnan province in China. And guess what they're saying? They believe this place is where a lot of today's species, including us humans, originally came from. So the thing is that Changjiang Biota in Yunnan dates back 518 million years. It's a treasure trove of ancient animal fossils, also a very important piece of the puzzle in understanding the Cambrian explosion. What's that? I'll get back to it, but let's talk about the fossils found there. In this collection, you'll find fossils of over 250 species. We're talking about ancient worms, the forefathers of today's shrimps, insects, spiders, scorpions, and even the earliest vertebrates. These are the ancestors of fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Some of their names are so complicated they'd twist your tongue into knots. Anyhow, the experts think this spot marks the birthplace of complex life during the Cambrian explosion, which was a climactic chapter in Earth's history dating back 500 million years. Around 541 million years back, during a time we call the Cambrian period, this explosion happened. Before this, most life forms were pretty simple, like single-celled organisms or small groups of cells hanging out together. Then, boom! The Cambrian explosion happened. It's like Earth suddenly burst into life with all sorts of complex creatures. I'm talking about the first appearance of many complex living things, including the early versions of animals we know today, such as shellfish, bugs, and starfish-like creatures, and these were the fossils that were found. Buried within the DNA of animals living today are clues about when major animal groups first appeared. It turns out the world they lived in was quite stressful, with changing conditions that could have pushed them to adapt quickly. The story gets more interesting when we learn about the Changjiang Biota, a collection of ancient creatures. Unlike what was previously thought, these animals didn't live in the deep, stable parts of the ocean. They called a bustling, oxygen-rich, shallow delta their home. What's fascinating is how storms played a role in their story. They swept these creatures from their lively delta homes into deeper, less oxygenated waters. This dramatic journey is why we're able to find and study them today. Their remains were exceptionally preserved in the mud. And even though now this place is on dry land in the mountains of Yunnan province, by examining rock core samples, scientists have found evidence of ancient marine currents, which quite literally paints a different picture of the past environment. The environment of Earth was quite different from earlier thoughts that these creatures preferred deeper, more predictable waters. This discovery has quite literally solved a 100-year-old mystery, but the next one isn't any less shocking either. Number 5. An escaping chicken led to the discovery of an entire city in the basement. Back in the 1960s, in a small town in Turkey, something straight out of a book plot happened. A man, simply renovating his home, stumbled upon a secret that would amaze the world. While doing the renovations in his home, contrary to many other complications, the one he faced was a bit different. His chickens kept disappearing in his basement. Was a thief hiding there, or just an evil soul consuming his chickens' souls? Well, none of the above. And he also found that out when he decided to dig around in his basement a bit. Guess what he found? The entrance to an entire underground city that was hidden in his basement. This wasn't just any city. This was Derinkuyu, the largest underground city ever found. Eventually, more than 600 doorways to this underground world were discovered by archaeologists in people's homes across the town. And I mean it when I say Derinkuyu is like something out of a storybook. It has 18 levels deep with everything a community needs. Homes, stores for dry food, places for cattle, schools, wineries, and even a chapel. They had a sophisticated system for fresh air and water, showing how smart these ancient builders were. Now, when was Derinkuyu built? That's a bit of a mystery. Some writings from way back in 370 BC mention it, so it's been around for a long time. Initially, it might have been a giant pantry, but over time, it became a safe haven from invaders. The city had massive stone doors that could only be opened from the inside, with tiny holes for defending against intruders. Who built Derinkuyu? That's another question. Some think the Hittites, an ancient group from the Bronze Age, started digging when they were under threat, but then the Phrygians, another powerful group, took over and built most of it. Over the centuries, the city changed hands many times, serving as a refugee during conflict, including during the 7th century Islamic raids. At its height, Derinkuyu supported a staggering 20,000 people. But by 1923, after thousands of years of use, the city was abandoned. The Cappadocian Greeks who lived there last left during the Greco-Turkish War. Today, this ancient underground city is open to visitors. In 1985, it even got added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. It's a place where you can literally walk through history. Honestly, this one is my favorite archaeological discovery story, but the next one comes a close second. Do you have any other interesting ones? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's move on. Number 6, 250-million-year-old dragon fossil. Finding fossils of ancient creatures isn't exactly headline news these days, right? We've got heaps of dinosaur bones collected over the years. But you know what's really fascinating? When people stumble upon fossils, that makes them think of dragons. And well, that's exactly what happened. There was this discovery in China of a fossil about 240 million years old. It got nicknamed a dragon because of its super long neck. The official name it received is Dinocephalosaurus orientalis. It was a 16-foot-long aquatic reptile from the time of the Triassic period, swimming around with a neck longer than its body and tail put together. It had flippers instead of legs and a neck that had 32 separate vertebrae. The exact reason why this creature had such a long neck is still up for debate among scientists, but they think it probably helped the Dinocephalosaurus to feed in rocky, crevice-filled waters, poking around for prey. Some think this long neck was a big help in hunting, letting it snake into tight spots under the water. They even found fish remains in the stomach area of one fossil, hinting that it was quite the marine predator, with its flippered limbs supporting the idea. This discovery was made by Professor Li Chun from the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology in Beijing. He was in a small village in Guizhou province, just minding his own business when he spotted a small vertebra in a limestone slab. The local farmers showed him to a pig pen where they found more rocks like that one, and that's where he started piecing together the bones of this species. And when you think about it, isn't it possible that what we call dragons were actually just dinosaurs that could fly, or well, in this case, swim? Instead of being pure myth, maybe those stories were actually based on reality. Plus, the resemblance between the Dinocephalosaurus and traditional Chinese dragons is uncanny, after all. It's a thought that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Number 7. One of the earliest proofs of slavery uncovered by archaeologists in the city, frozen in time. Archaeologists at Pompeii Archaeological Park made an incredible yet heartbreaking discovery recently. They found a prison bakery. This wasn't just any bakery, though. It was a place where enslaved people were kept alongside donkeys, working tirelessly to grind grain. This grain was used for making bread. The room is believed to be tiny and only had these little windows high up, all covered with iron bars. If you look closely at the floor, you can still see marks left by animals. They used to walk around in circles for hours, all blindfolded, working together. It was also a part of a much bigger house that was really well kept and had some beautiful paintings on the walls. Yet, right there, alongside such beauty, were the living quarters of enslaved people. Gabriel Zuchtriegel, the director of Pompeii, shared how the discovery really makes you think about the harsh realities of ancient slavery. He talks about how finding this place reminds us that people who were forced into slavery once lived and worked there, enduring incredible hardship. But this isn't the first time they've found evidence of how enslaved people lived in Pompeii. Just a bit earlier, they discovered a small room that was clearly where enslaved people slept, as well as a house that would have been considered middle class back then. Keep in mind, we're talking about a civilization that goes all the way back to 79 CE. The only reason we know so much about Pompeii and can find these places is because of a huge disaster that happened back in 79 CE. When Mount Vesuvius, a volcano, erupted and covered everything nearby in ash, it preserved the ancient Roman life as if it was taking a snapshot. And this discovery is just the proof of how slavery was a huge part of life in the Mediterranean long ago. Like in Athens around 450 BC, out of every 4 people you met, one was likely enslaved. That's between 80,000 to 100,000 people living without freedom in just one city. Fast forward to Italy by the end of the 1st century BC, and the numbers were even more staggering. Up to 1.5 million individuals were in chains, making up to a quarter of the population. But here's something important to note. Back then, slavery wasn't about the color of your skin. It was unfair and harsh, yes, but people were enslaved for different reasons. Many were captured in wars or brought in by traders, and sadly, if you were born to parents who were slaves, you would be one too. But there has been a discovery that traces the lines of humanity to even before Pompeii. Number 8. Archaeologists discovered a new species of ancient humans. For the longest time, everyone thought East Africa was where it all started. Around 200,000 years ago, humans came into existence. But then, something happened that made everyone rethink that idea. In a place called the Cradle of Humankind in South Africa, scientists found the remains of a new kind of human called Homo naledi. It was a discovery made by Dr. Lee Berger and his team in the Rising Star Cave system. They weren't just looking around. They had been exploring these caves for years when they stumbled upon over 1,500 pieces of bone from multiple Homo naledi individuals back in 2013. Now, what they discovered showed that Homo naledi were pretty interesting. They walked on 2 legs, were about 5 feet tall, and weighed around 100 pounds. They had hands that could grab and hold things tightly, and brains that were small but mighty, making everyone wonder if they were smarter than we thought. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Homo naledi apparently also buried their dead. Yep, because archaeologists found shallow pits with skeletons in them right there in the cave. And not just that, they also found cave walls with some kind of symbols scratched into them. This discovery shook up the whole story of human evolution. And guess what? Homo naledi were living around 300,000 years ago, at the same time as other human species like us, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, and even Neanderthals. Do you think these species would have gotten along with each other? And that's about it. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more amazing content. Also, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I post a new video. Share your thoughts and any questions you have in the comments section below. See you in the next one.